You are working for 40 years non-stop, just a few vacations here and there. Still, you're losing the wealth game. The system isn't broken. It's working just exactly as intended. There's a brutal math behind why most people never get rich. So you might have seen the numbers, right? 30% of wealth is controlled by 1%. 70% of wealth is controlled by 10%. If you are among the bottom 90%, you are fighting for just 30% of the wealth. Now, how much do we need to own in order to be in the top 10%? Now, to just enter the 10%, we need roughly $2 million. To be in the median of the 10%, right, so the cut off the typical 10%er, we need roughly $4 million. Now, there's correlation with age, right? The older people tend to have much more wealth than the younger people because we accumulate wealth over time. So it's very unrealistic to expect somebody in their 30s to already have the $2 million. So what's really the number depending on age? It's $2 million overall. It's only $500,000 if you are below the age of 35. It is $3 million if you are at the age above 70. So in your 50s, you want to have reached the $2 million mark. So the median 10%er has $2 million and is 50 years old. Now, what does it mean when we've got wealth and passive income and we get paid rent for our property, we get paid dividends for our stocks? Actually, what's happening is that the people that own wealth suck out value from the people that actively have to work to make a living. Because in the end, that's all what it is, right? When we get a dividend payment, then the company is sending capital to the investors. It's not sending it to the people that work for the company. The workers had to produce the value, and part of the value just goes to the investors. So really, it's a transfer mechanism from active labor to the people that already own wealth. And so the rich people are sucking off a value from the working class, or maybe, to be a bit more exact, the old people are sucking off value from the young people. And so over time, capital concentrates more and more. So more and more of the value that's being created through active labor gets transferred to the investors. The younger generation has it harder and harder over time. And that's personally my thesis why we've got this global crisis with demographics, why nobody is getting children. Really, the younger generation doesn't feel safe enough to bring children in this world. It seems to be too hard to be able to afford children. It seems to be too much of a burden on top of already a very stressful work life. We can also see that correlation, as in the more competitive an economy is, the less children are born. So we've got a lower birth rate in the city centers compared to, say, the countryside. We've got also a lower birth rate where taxes tend to be rather low and where capital concentration is even faster compared to countries with higher tax rates. Over time, we see how capital gains are growing faster than active income, than labor income. And even among the labor income, we see more concentration. You might have seen the chart how the executive pay compared to the average worker's pay in a company tends to grow faster and faster. It used to be only 10, 20, 30 times the average worker that an executive got paid. Now it's hundreds of times potentially. And so this is where most people stop with the analysis. Capital is concentrated. A few people make all the gains. The vast majority is suffering. And it seems like it's the rich class that should be blamed for taking the value of the regular Joe. But really, that's not necessarily what's happening. Because when we look at the returns of, say, the S&P 500 over time, and we compare this with the growth of the monetary base, those two numbers tend to go in line with each other. We've got a monetary base expansion of roughly 6.8%. So if you buy the S&P 500 and you consider fees and you consider taxes, really, against monetary debasement, against how many new dollars enter the system, even the investor doesn't gain any purchasing power. So how is it possible that the working class is falling behind, yet the rich capital owner doesn't really gain anything against the monetary debasement? Doesn't it make much more sense that the rich are just getting value from the poor? Because the poor have to pay for the dividend. But when even after dividends, etc., the rich don't make much income at all because of the monetary debasement, there's actually something different going on here. And so when the real returns of the rich is pretty much zero, after considering the monetary debasement, after you consider how much the US dollar is debasing over time, then really what's happening here is that the government is taking away value from the poor people. The rich people can, at least to a degree, protect themselves from the debasement of the US dollar. The poor people cannot. The poor people on average do not see their labor getting an additional payment of 6.8% every single year. The official inflation numbers are of course much lower, and maybe there's an inflation adjustment of say 2 or 3%. But that means every single year active labor devalues by 4%. And owning capital does not devalue. And so the rich relative to the poor, they get ahead. That's true. But really, it's the government that takes over more and more of the value creation through the debasement of the US dollar. Capital returns are fake, right? Just have a look at the S&P 500 relative to the US money supply. I show this chart regularly on this channel. The working class is falling behind though because they can't adjust their wages relative to the monetary debasement. It's really not the rich that are stealing the value created from the workers. Really, it's the government that takes away the value from the workers. And it can't take away the value from the rich people that easily because the rich people own assets and the assets appreciate with the monetary debasement. And of course, there's also a hierarchy to how much people are losing in this game. Again, the executives, they tend to increase their income faster than the average worker. If we look at the top 10% of active incomes of households, that tends to grow by roughly 5% per annum, which is still less than the 6.8% monetary debasement. If we look at the bottom 25% of active income, that tends to grow only by 3% per annum. So the poor workers are falling behind even faster compared to the skilled professional workers. But even the skilled professional workers, they are falling behind against the owners of capital and of course against the spending power of the government. And so what do we learn from this? Modern economics, the way it's set up pretty much globally everywhere, is a binary game. There are winners and there are losers. There are leaders of government and owners of capital on the one side, and there's everybody else on the other side. If you're not in the top 10% of capital owners, if you don't have your 2 million by age 50, or if you don't have your 500,000 by age 35, then you will have it harder and harder every single year. The economic system then is actively working against you. And so because of capital concentration, there are less and less winners over time relative to the losers. Now it might be okay to be in the top 10%, but maybe in 20 or 30 years, we have to be in the top 5%. And maybe then another 20, 30 years, we have to be in the top 3 or in the top 2%. It gets harder and harder. And while the other 98% of the population doesn't have to starve, because in general, the economy is progressing, the difference between the haves and have-nots is widening over time. And so you simply have to ask yourself, is it worth for you to try to enter the top 10%? You either work really hard to become part of the winners and then you can relax a little bit because you do have passive income. Some of the active labor will get transferred to you. You will not be affected that much by the monetary debasement. Or do you not try to play that game and you simply try to have a life outside of all of this capitalistic thinking? That of course can also work, but don't expect that you will get it easier over time. Things, at least in terms of work pressure, etc., will become harder and harder over time. And again, we can quantify this. It's 500,000 if you're below 35, it's 2 million if you're 50. And then you can make your calculations if you're currently in your 40s, etc., where you roughly might want to be. If you got some value out of this video, feel free to give it a like. It will help the channel grow. Feel free to also check out the playlist with many of those mindset and strategy videos. I've published several of those videos. Just go to this channel, click on playlist, and feel free to binge watch those kind of videos if you got some value here. See you next time, and thanks for watching. Cheers.